I'm going to bring him on the screen now. And his YouTube channel is called Geoff Buys Cars. So welcome, Geoff.
Good evening.
Geoff, it's good to see you, Geoff, not sitting in a car. Usually when I see you, you're sitting in a car making your excellent YouTube videos. But no, thanks very much for joining us. And, one of the things, as I say, I was really keen to get this chat with you because just genuinely, I mean, I've loved cars all my life. I've driven so many different types and makes and all of that. And I thought, and I'm now at the point, and I'm a lot older than you, but I'm thinking, do you know something, David? You see, in about maybe 15, 20 years' time, I'm not sure exactly what we're going to be driving, if anything. So I want to talk to you about that. I want to talk about 15-minute cities, aka prisons. I want to chat about that. But to start with, just top of the news, the whole Sadiq Khan, the ULEZ scheme in London, I think we got some kind of breaking news in that, legally speaking, and then you're taking that. So maybe just sort of chat us through that to start with.
Okay, so today what's happened with the ULEZ extension, this is Sadiq Khan's plan to expand the ULEZ. I guess I first sort of heard about this back in November, started making videos, and my take on the ULEZ expansion is partly what has grown the channel. Now, today, what we've had after loads of backlash is we have now finally found out that it will be going to court, and there's 5 boroughs that are taking to the cleaners, essentially, to try and block this ULEZ extension. As much as that is something to be celebrated, I actually think we should be very cautious, and it makes me think that what's actually happened is the whole ULEZ expansion was a Trojan horse, and I've just posted a video today giving my thoughts, which is that the whole ULEZ expansion wasn't actually about expanding the ULEZ, but it was about introducing road user charging, pay by the mile, starting in London and then going elsewhere. So the fact that it's going to court and will probably be blocked might be seen as cause for celebration, but I actually think it's not.
And just for the benefit of our American viewers and those elsewhere in the world watching this, by ULEZ, that's the acronym for ultra low emission zone, isn't it? So it's all tied up. It's so environmentally friendly, Geoff. I mean, they're only trying to save the planet. Why do you motorists want to kill the polar bears?
Absolutely, and for some reason, us motorists, I mean, I've got polar bears mounted on plinths all around my house, the ones that I've killed with the various cars that I've owned over the years. But the thing is, it started as a low emission zone, and the idea is that it's meant to be a low emission zone to save the planet. But as you have noticed there's no point having a low emission zone if you can still take your polluting vehicle in, so long as you pay for it. It's not a low emission zone, it's just a tax, basically.
Yeah. And as you say, I mean, it's a good point you make in the video, and I would urge everyone to go and watch it, the new one you just recorded. I mean, we have to be careful, Geoff, that a lot of the things that sometimes things come along and our side sees them as wins, but it's not always that ain't necessarily so. Basically, you've got to be careful because, as you say, this face wreck. Well, I mean, we'll talk about it, 15-minute cities and all that, but so much of this is it's interwoven, isn't it? It's a whole big agenda.
This is the thing, and this is what I'm trying to get across to people on my videos, and many people will say, oh, you're a car channel, why aren't you out buying cars? Well, the answer is that all of these things are connected. And again, I don't live in London, I don't particularly visit London, but I can see that what gets rolled out in London is only then going to end up across the rest of the country. And once you see that all of these little things are interconnected, you realize that what's going on with the motorists and what's going on with the farms and the food supply and all the agricultural issues that are happening at the moment, they're all part of the same thing. And when you can see it that way, suddenly you sit back and go, oh, this isn't good. Whereas it's very easy to look at things in isolation and say, well, a low emission zone might be a good idea, and maybe we should ban some of the older cars from the cities. Everything is done and presented in a way that there is that kind of silver lining, but underneath it all, it's always much more sinister.
Well, that's right. They try to sell it to you as if it's virtuous and good. So they sell you the idea, well, we don't want these, heavily polluted inner cities or in inner towns, although the evidence for that and the impact on health is very, very questionable. And I think our friend Sadiq Khan down in London has been stretching credulity way past the bounds of, anything that's plausible. But, nonetheless, that's how they do it. It's like it's always a good idea. So talking of always a good idea, let's talk about electric vehicles, because as I say, I am a car fan, loved cars, love technology, I love the cars with the best tech in it, loved all of that. And a couple of years ago, Geoff, I would have said, yeah, I'm pretty much, EVs, they seem fine. But that was from a position of almost complete ignorance, right? Now, 2 or 3 years along, I'm going, whoa, these electric vehicles, I don't think this is going to work in so many different aspects. What's your take on EVs?
Well, why don't we start from scratch then? So if we look at the EV thing, let's take it from face value. Here we have a car that produces no emissions from the tailpipe, that you don't have to pay any road tax to drive on UK roads, and you won't have to put any petrol and diesel in it. There is the silver lining. Isn't that fantastic? You can save the planet because you're not producing any emissions when you drive along. It's not going to cost you anything to drive, and you can charge it up at home. That's your headline sort of marketing slogan. But the reality, as people are realizing, is the cars don't have the range they're claimed to have. The charging is done at home and has gotten a lot more expensive, as we've seen with the energy crisis, and as we are now seeing all the supermarkets that put in these free chargers are now either removing them or upping the price. The batteries, as we've gone further down the line, we have found out that the way the batteries are built is despicable. In order for you to have your electric car on your drive, there must be so much suffering that takes place in places like the Democratic Republic of Congo. The batteries are exploding at an alarming rate. And basically what we're seeing is the technology for electric cars isn't really ready, and they've been launched anyway. People will say to me on my YouTube channel, oh, you're just an anti-EV person. Why are you so against EVs? And for me, it's always been quite obvious. I don't like the idea, and every EV car will be plugged into some sort of mainframe, and at some point, somebody is able to switch it off. For me, it's about control. I like to be able to fill my car with diesel and drive 650, 700 miles. And the way I like to run my life doesn't fit with an electric car. The way people have been sold electric cars is very much not the reality of owning an electric car.
Yeah, and you see, but that's a crucial point to start with. The essence of driving is freedom. You jump in your car, and you can go pretty much where you want within the remit of what you've got in your tank. But it's always been pretty easy. But that doesn't look to be the direction we're going in at all, is it? Because I'll tell you, Geoff, I spoke to a lady last week who's responsible for a large UK, for buying, contracting cars out to large UK fleets. Very, very experienced person. And we got chatting about EVs, and I was saying, I'm against these things now. And she was saying, yeah, you're right to be. Only very particular circumstances would an EV be, even if you forget about the moral considerations, as you say, the child labor, all of that. If you set them to one side, but on the practicalities of it's like it can't work on the basis of the same number of people driving the same number of cars. But that's what worries me.
No, absolutely. And you are right to say that there are three aspects to the whole electric car thing. You have the moral aspect of how the car is built and the carbon impact of the car in build. You have the cost of running the car itself, and then you have the purchase price of buying the car. In order to actually function in some of these sort of EV circles, and in order for an EV to work for you, you have to ignore two of those three facets of the electric car thing. You have to ignore the morals of how the car got to you, and you have to ignore the purchase price, because in some cases they're twice the price of a petrol equivalent. So the only people that these cars work for are people that can either write off the purchase price, i.e. it's being purchased for them by a company, or it's a tax thing, or they're so wealthy that it doesn't matter, and they have the facility to charge the car at home, and they don't like going on long road trips. For everybody else, they don't work as cars.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, our producer, who you met just before we came on air, he did me a very good article about if you were traveling from, let's say, somewhere in the Midlands, and you were traveling down to, I think it was the south of France, a journey like that, Geoff, is that's going to take you a very, very long time with all kinds of pressures in an electric vehicle. So you're free, so I just don't think the things are even practical. Never mind the part of point 1 and point 2. You pay through the teeth, you forget about the child labor, but hey, yeah, I just don't. And yet, it seems I'm also told, Geoff, tell me if this is right, that more and more people there's more of them being bought. People are buying them, are they not?
People are buying them, but I think it's to do with the way the government subsidies operate, and I think it's to do with the way they are marketed. There's been a report that's just been done by Which magazine that they've tested 70 new EVs, and they found that on average the range that these EVs have is 20% down on what the manufacturer is quoting. So a question that I've put in a video that's as yet not yet on YouTube is, what are these salespeople saying to these customers when they're sitting down at the dealership and saying, okay, well, how many miles does my £30,000 small hatchback have in its available range? Is the dealer saying, oh, well, it's got 263, or is he being honest and saying, actually, it's only got more likely 210? I don't think the people that are buying these EVs are fully aware of everything that is involved with owning one. And what we're starting to see as well is first generation EV buyers that went out thinking they were saving the planet and bought an EV are either trying to get out of their 3-year lease early, or when their 3-year lease finishes on their EV, they are not going back to electric cars. So one of the videos I did was when I spoke to a UK auction house about what happens when these electric vehicles go across the block. Are the trade customers looking to buy EVs because they know if they put them on their forecourts that they will sell? And the answer is no. The dealers are not looking to buy these EVs secondhand. They're not looking to sell them in the secondhand market, which is causing a huge drop in the prices when they go through the auctions. So that has a knock-on effect on the way new EVs are sold, because if their depreciation over 3 years is 2 or 3 times that of a petrol equivalent, then even the most sensible people won't buy them.
Yeah, so that's got to be really going to screw up the market then, isn't it? Because of what you've just said. That's the market doing its natural thing. That is a market working in its truest way. But on the front side of that is we haven't had a market working in its truest way, because there's been so many subsidies. There's been subsidies on the price of the car. There's been subsidies on putting the chargers in. There's been subsidies and incentives on how you charge and where you charge. And once you remove all of those subsidies, you then have a true market. And if a product doesn't work in a true market, then it will fail. And this seems to be the case with a lot of these products that are put out to save the planet. They don't actually work in a true market. They only work in a market that is subsidized and propped up by government legislation. And you can say the same about solar panels as well. Maybe that's a conversation for another day. You could. I see a comment here over on YouTube. Hector's House says, electric cars were another IQ test. I grin like a Cheshire cat when I pull up next to Teslas. Pitiful people. I mean, I don't know. They've just been seduced by the advertising, I think. I'm not, some people will buy for, will fall for it, Geoff. They generally probably think this is a good thing, or at least they did until some of this information is beginning to get out. One of the other things is you keep reading these stories about when I'm not sure, how long does a battery last in an electric vehicle, Geoff? Is there a particular battery life?
That's a very good question. At the moment, we don't really know. It depends on the technology. Some of the early cars, like the Nissan Leaf, would have used slightly different battery technology to what we have today. And I see both sides of it. So in the YouTube comments on my videos, I have people saying, oh, there's Teslas in the USA that have done almost 1 million miles. But at the same time, I found and did a video on not too long ago an early Nissan Leaf that now, I think it was 10 years old, and now it has only 54% of its battery left. So I did a comparison saying, okay, if 10 years ago you had bought this Nissan Leaf with an electric battery power, or this Ford Focus with a petrol engine, what would be the values today? And it worked out that the Nissan Leaf was something like £12,000 more expensive when it was new. And today, in the second-hand market, it was worth half as much. So it had depreciated at a shocking rate compared to the Ford Focus. Obviously, with the Ford Focus being a petrol car as well, If it had a 450-mile range in the tank when it was new, fill it up with petrol today, and it will have a 450-mile range. The Nissan Leaf, on the other hand, the seller was saying, it had 200 miles from new, and now it's running something like 50 miles on each charge. So at the minute, the technology is too new for us to be able to say, truthfully, what the battery degradation is going to be. I don't know if it's going to be 3 years, 6 years, 9 years, 10 years, but the problem is, it's not just the batteries themselves. These cars are so technologically complex, and this applies to new petrol, diesel, hybrid cars. It applies to all of them. Yeah. Modern cars are so horrendously technologically complex. It's no longer like the old days where it would be rust and corrosion that takes your car off the road when it becomes too expensive to fix. But it's actually all the electrical problems. If you've got a headlight unit that is going to be a £400 or £500 part to buy from the dealer just because your headlight has failed, and then your headlight needs to be coded to the car, and you're going to have to pay the dealer more labour. It's ridiculous. You need to change a bulb on an old Volvo, you pop the headlight off, you go in, you unscrew your bulb, and you replace it. Yeah. But with the modern cars, it just doesn't work that way. You've got electronic tailgates, you've got these puddle lamps in the floors, you've got all manner of crazy electronics that we just don't need in cars. And it's putting the load, the electronic load on these vehicles through the roof. They're just not going to work in 10 years' time. They are not built to last. I know I digressed a little bit there from your battery question, but the honest answer is we don't know. I don't know. These batteries might be fantastic. We might find that in 10 years' time, people are saying, you know what? These new batteries were brilliant. My battery is 10 years old. My car still has 95% of its range. I suspect that won't be the case, though.
Although it's funny, it's a fair enough point you make regarding how incredibly complex modern cars are. And just as an example, just about 2 hours ago, I was out. My wife was driving her kind of fancy BMW, and we're traveling down the road, and all of a sudden the dash just went. The dash went. So, and we were having a laugh because I can remember when the only thing that would have gone would have been a wee bulb. Now I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? But this is going to have to go right into the dealers and all kinds of stuff looked at. Yeah. Cars have become very complex, but electric cars, it's a different scale of complexity, isn't it, Geoff? Really, as far as I can see, because you mentioned range, and this is one of the big issues: range, and the what is the actual range versus what they quote. But the range varies. So if it's winter, as far as I understand, Geoff, or it's very cold, then the range reduces. And if you have to. I've seen videos, Geoff, people having to turn off their heating, turn off the electrics. What's that all about?
Absolutely. So if you start your electric car on a cold day, your range is already depleted because the battery is cold. Your heater, I've heard statistics from 10 to 20% just for using your heater. So on a cold day, really, with an electric car, you're failing right from the get-go. But whereas with a petrol or diesel car, if you sit cruising on the motorway at 65, 70 miles an hour, you're getting the very best economy out of your engine. You're getting the opposite with an electric car. Electric cars do not like cruising on a motorway.
Yeah, so loads of interesting questions coming in here. Craig says a lot of electric components fail because the EU banned lead from solder. Is that right? Solder, is that right? I didn't know that.
I don't know. I'd have to go and research that one. That's a very interesting point, and it sounds about right, to be honest.
Yeah, and then Trev says servicing an EV is quite a lot more expensive, I've heard. Is that right? Is the service charge of EVs is expensive?
Jury's out on that one. In theory, with an EV, there's less to go wrong because there's less moving parts. You don't have pistons, you don't have valves, you don't have chains, you don't have cams, you don't have all that complex stuff that you have with an engine. Yeah. But what you do have is highly complex electrical components that are extremely dangerous. So then you have a situation where if you break down in your electric car, the breakdown service can't do a great deal with you at the side of the road. Your vehicle can't be transported in the traditional way, either because of the way the drivetrain works, i.e. if it's four-wheel drive, it can't be towed by an AA van. It's more likely that it would need to go on a lorry. And some of these EVs are so heavy that they're actually too heavy for the breakdown service vehicles that are out there. So you've got to wait for a heavy-duty lorries come and pick you up. Notwithstanding the fact that some cars, like the Volkswagen ID3, there's only 3 dealers in the country that can fix them. That is if the dealer even wants to fix them, because I've heard that there's many cases where electric cars are going back and the dealers are just going, nah, not touching it. And people are being left without their cars for months and months and months because nobody wants to fix them.
Yeah, but okay. But by 2035, the government has decreed that's it. I think it's 2035, whenever, in the next 10, 15 years. No more filthy hydrocarbon cars. No, clean green EVs. So Geoff, this is one of my issues. I mean, I don't think this is in any regard plausible, possible, desirable, but yet that seems to be where the government wants to take us.
It is, and we've seen the kickback. I think it was just last week I did a video where finally we're starting to see the brands, the big manufacturers, wake up to this agenda and say, hold on a minute, this doesn't really work for us. So we have the 2030 goal to no longer sell petrol and diesel vehicles in this country by 2030. And the Germans, your BMW, Volkswagen, Audi, Mercedes, finally turned around and said, you know what, we're not doing that. So they've pushed it in Europe to 2035. So the pressure is on the UK to move it to 2035 as well. And the fact of the matter is, this has to be led by the market. If the people that build the cars are saying these cars don't work, people are not buying them because they don't work, we can't run a viable business by only making these type of cars, then the business side of things will have to dictate the legislation side of things and not the other way around. So I was very relieved to see that kickback starting in Germany because it just doesn't work. We're not ready for it yet. The cars aren't good enough. We don't have the infrastructure. It doesn't make sense.
And wasn't it Mercedes, I think, that kicked back and said that they were demanding also that you could drive a traditional engine, but they were using there was a particular type of fuel. I did a thing on this myself that they've said, what is it? Some sort of hydrogen derivative type thing. Did you see that, Geoff? And again, because I've spoken to quite a few of the car brands myself, and over the last several years, 5 or 6 years, and I remember asking, for example, Bentley, saying to them, how are you going to get the performance and stuff out of an all-electric model? And there's people in showrooms just say, yeah, don't worry, that the guys will do it. But I don't think it's possible. Do you, in terms of performance from an electric?
You can get, it depends what type of performance you want, because if what you want is straight line performance and if what you want is a dazzling 0 to 60 time, then absolutely an electric car can do it. But what it can't do is the character and the experience of driving a real driver's car. Now, what I find ludicrous and what I've been quite outspoken about on my channel is, for me, an electric car works if it is small, lightweight, cheap transport for the masses. But that's not what we're seeing in the marketplace. What we're seeing in the marketplace is 2.5 to 3.5 ton SUVs that are £80,000 plus, and they are selling like hotcakes. Which says to me, we as a species are just not ready for electric cars. We can't be trusted with it.
Yeah, well, you're right. I've seen some of those monsters. I mean, the weight of some of those big SUVs must be incredible. I mean, I've seen people commenting here. I can see on the size of the batteries in the things, So yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I drive a hybrid, a Porsche hybrid, and it's reasonably okay, But even then, I'm now of the opinion, I wish I didn't really, because the electric bit is kind of the cost of electric, what we've seen, thanks to our support of sanctions against Russia and all of that, we're now paying through the teeth for electric to serve, in the cars as well. So I don't think there can't be any price advantage anymore, even in a hybrid, can there?
If you drive a Porsche hybrid, you should definitely subscribe to my channel, because in the coming weeks, I'm going to be linking up with another YouTuber called the Mac Master, who makes he makes food videos, but he has also a Porsche hybrid, and he got quite well known recently because he had such a horrendous experience with his Porsche hybrid. So I'm going to link up with him. We're going to do a challenge together, and we're going to answer all of those key questions, and we will find out if a brand new Porsche hybrid is as good as my 26-year-old Volvo estate.
See, this is the problem. I think I know what the answer to that is, but it'd be really interesting to watch it. But I think probably everybody watching knows what the answer to that is as well. But like, how do you explain then? Like, take Tesla. and what Musk has sort of been producing there. I mean, is that all just a big kind of fantasy thing as well? How do you see the future for Tesla? I see video after video of Teslas going on fire, all kinds of stuff like that. And is that just going to be a balloon that bursts, Geoff? The whole Tesla thing?
That's a very good question, and I don't know. Part of my thinking on this is, do you remember if you have kids, you might have at some point bought one of those ride-on electric cars, right? You plug it in, your child drives it around for about 10 minutes, and then the battery goes flat, and you say, this is a load of rubbish, and it's a pain. You're at the park, the battery's flat, the thing's heavy, you have to push it home, your child's crying. That's an electric car. So going through that very same thing that they should have learned with the small ride-on children's toys.
Yeah.
And I just feel like we're at a stage in life where these products are not fit for purpose, but there is a will from industry to carry on with it. There's a will from shareholders to carry on with it. And there's a will for the people for it to work. I think when business finally wakes up to the fact that actually electric cars don't fully work in the real world for most people, and when they realize that the government is serious about the legislation that they're bringing in, being pushed by whatever shady organizations governments are being pushed by, that's when business will really have to move towards e-fuels and hydrogen and alternative fuel technologies. And we're starting to see it happen. Porsche talking about developing their own e-fuel. We know JCB is pushing very hard towards hydrogen. And when they push towards hydrogen and when they develop e-fuel, they push back forcibly at the electric car agenda. And that's brilliant. And we need to see more of it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and that obviously is the way things should work. It should be driven by manufacturers, what they're able to produce. But I just think, with this net zero thing, that the government is legally mandated. I mean, it's legally tied. Now, I suppose that all governments can break laws when they want, but allegedly legally signed up to net zero. You can't get to net zero in 2050 and have anything like the number of cars we have on the roads in 2023, Geoff, surely, unless those cars magically become EVs.
Well, this is where you start, and this is where you have to start looking at what is going on in the wider picture. We can get to net zero by 2050, okay? Let's get to net zero by 2050. It's going to cost £100,000 for every man, woman and child. And when we do get to net zero by 2050, the impact that it will have on the global temperature will be negligible, virtually nada. Yeah. So what we have to do is we have to say, who are these people that are asking our government or forcing our government to get to net 50, and why have we not, as a people, been consulted on it? So I tried to start a petition just a couple of days ago to basically say what I've just said to you. Agenda 2050 and net zero is something the UK public have never been consulted on. The science doesn't stack up, and I was told that there was already a petition out there. So I thought, great, let's go sign it. So if people who are watching want to go to my Twitter, sign the petition. Why haven't we been consulted on Agenda 2030 and the whole net zero thing? We should have been consulted on it. The people should have been asked, and we should have been able to present some alternative science, because the mainstream science just doesn't seem to stack up, and that seems to be a trend.
No, you're right, but nothing about the whole sort of EVs and net zero stacks up at all. You see, let me give you one of my sort of suspicions. I think the suspicion is that they want us, or not all of us, but a goodly number of us, off the roads in the next 20 years. They don't want you basically on the roads. They sure as hell don't want the likes of me on the roads. And they're able to do it under this virtue signaling, we're saving the planet narrative. Because, I mean, another practical aspect about this is, I live in Northern Ireland, if you had an EV, there's only a handful of charging points in the whole bloody country. It's completely mad. The only way it would work would be, well, it doesn't, Geoff, and there's no grandiose plans in place to build and I was going to say quadruple it, but that wouldn't make any difference. It'd be like 100,000 times, and then maybe. So that makes me think, well, hang on, if those in charge, they know all this stuff, so they know I think they know what they're doing. Do you not?
I agree, and I think once you ask those very, very basic questions, so if we say there are X amount of private cars in this country, is it physically, scientifically, technologically possible to move those X amount of cars to electric cars? Has everybody got space for a charging cable at home? Is there enough material in the ground to make the batteries? And when you scrutinize those questions, the answer always comes back as no. So if the answer is no, if they don't want to replace every single one of the cars on the road with an car, then what do they want to do with all the cars? And you only ever end up on the answer of they want to get rid of them. How are they going to get rid of the cars? Well, I think they're going to get rid of the people. Yeah,
I think both are expendable, but you're right. I mean, and that's just like cold logic, isn't it? When you look down sort of into the next 10 years or so, but what annoys me is like the politicians and the likes, they're not stupid. They may be wicked, but they're not stupid. And yet, you don't get a lot of discussion on this point. That's why I was keen to bring you on, Geoff, and loads of people can, because I think we're all interested. It's just that in the mainstream, they don't ask these questions. Instead, all you get is the flashy ads for, the latest EV for this, that, and the other, and it's all super sexy and it looks great and it's a lovely lifestyle. What's not to like about it? And I think everything.
Yeah, completely agree. Couldn't agree more. These debates that we're having now, the conversations that we're having, and the questions that we're posing, you're not allowed to ask at the highest level.
Yeah. I mean, again, more comments to say over in Getter. Being bounced to electric vehicles is the road to no vehicles. Yep, I agree with that, Geoff. I think that it's all about control. Yeah. Although here's a laugh. I'll give you a laugh. Talking about vehicles, well, in the last 24 hours, we've had the President of the United States, Mr. Joseph Biden, arrive in an airport not too far from me. He came in a cavalcade of, I think it was 12 or 18 massive vehicles. And he flew in, obviously, in his huge Air Force One. And these are the people that are lecturing ordinary drivers around the world that, oh, you're very bad people because you're driving these petrol guzzling, polar bear killing machines. And this is what they do. It's the hypocrisy. I mean, you see the beast that they call it, the beast, the press. I mean, great. I'd love to be in that. That would be good to experience what that's like. But it's like one rule for them and another rule for the 99% of the rest of us, which I think is pretty appalling.
Absolutely. One of my favourite people at the moment is Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London. I've made a lot of videos about him and what he's up to.
Yeah.
As I was editing a video earlier on, there was a clip where he was approached by one of his constituents who just wanted to speak to him. And Mr. Khan keeps this gent at arm's bay with a bodyguard, and then jumps in a V8 powered Range Rover, and the number plate was shown on the video. So I thought, I'm just going to pull up the specs and see what it actually was. Well, it's a V8 autobiography Sentinel, which is the fully armored Range Rover. They start at £400,000 and they're only powered by V8 engines. This is the man that has just written a book on how to achieve behavioral change around the climate.
Face palm, absolutely. But this is the thing: all of them, Khan, Biden, Sunak, all of these guys are absolute hypocrites. But what bothers me is there's millions and millions of people like you and me, people who love cars, who are happy with cars, whatever. But it doesn't matter what the car is, and we've loved the fact that, especially Americans, I mean, the car is very much synonymous with the American, freedom and freewheeling down the highway and all of that. And that is going to go if these people have their way, because they'll simply make it just becomes impractical. But then maybe there's a solution, Geoff. You see, we're worrying unnecessarily, because the good news is when the 15-minute cities arrive, we're going to be so happy we won't have to drive. It'll not be Geoff buys cars, it'll be Geoff buys bikes, because that's all you need. You can just cycle around your little 15-minute, 20-minute neighborhood. Isn't that a lovely proposition?
I'm looking forward to my 15-minute neighborhood. I really am. It'll be lovely to not have to go anywhere. I won't have to go and visit family who I don't want to see.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, all jokes aside, one of the things that I put on Twitter that did extremely well and got shared all over the place, and embarrassingly had a typo in it, was I quite simply said, I have a simple litmus test to find out whether 15-minute cities are a good idea or not. What do they build first? Do they build the amenities and the new play parks? Or do they install the restrictions and the cameras? Because there is your answer. Again, with the 15-minute cities, like we said when we started this conversation, there's a sliver that it might be a good idea, and that's what it's sold on. Wouldn't it be lovely to have everything within 15 minutes of your house? And the flip side is you will not be allowed to go more than 15 minutes from your house, and if you do, there'll be a camera that will charge you, or there'll be a gate post.
Yeah, which we have seen, Geoff, and I know you've talked about it. But this is like stuff that's actually happening, and I think the plan is to roll it out. And I have to say, one of the bit that really worries me is that they talk about 15-minute cities. So if I live in a very rural location, so I've got basically fields around me, and I'm about 10 to 15 minutes away from anywhere. So that makes me think, I wonder what they've got in plan for, if you like, rural people like me. Might the plan be that we're not going to be in the rural environment in the future, because that could be all turned into solar farms, or it could be turned into, wind farms, or God knows what else they come up with, vaccine laboratories. I mean, it's places like Bath. I was in Bath not that long ago, lovely city and all that there, but that's one of the ones that they want to make. And I'm thinking, but why would you want to do that? It's not that huge a city. Why would you need to have 15-minute, 20-minute sort of neighborhoods within it? Makes no sense, Geoff, to me.
Makes no sense. And again, you have to question the motive. And they'll always say to us, oh, there's been a lot more interest in 15-minute cities. No, there hasn't. Nobody's showing any interest in 15-minute cities. We want better shops. We want better play parks. We want better amenities. We're not interested in your cameras, and we're not interested in your infrastructure. So again, where is the 15-minute narrative coming from? Well, it's coming from extremely high up, and it's infiltrating every single council, because there's so many councils that see doing the exact same thing at the exact same time. And all I can do as a YouTuber, as an entertainer, is just, I hate the term wake people up, but that's genuinely all I can do. I can make funny videos that highlights what's going on. And then it's up to the person, it's up to another human being to connect the dots and say, hang on a minute, they told me the 15-minute city was for my benefit. Why haven't they built a new play park? Why haven't they put any shops up? Why haven't they made sure I've got access to a pharmacy? And why is there a new pole at the end of the road with 4 extremely complex cameras on it?
That's exactly right. And that's why I think what you do, Geoff, in particular on your YouTube, is so important, because it does get that, it gets that information out to, let's say, people that we would maybe call normies. If you're coming from some of the other arguments that I come from on all kinds of topics, which you might agree with in some of them, but you're always aware of the fact that you're excluding normies a bit. But the normie people, like, they are, all those drivers, all those millions of Brit drivers are all gonna have problems in the not too distant future if they don't have them already. And by doing it the way you do it, it's a nice way of, I think it's a nice way of doing it. So it's not like full on in your face, but all the same, there's hints in there, I think, which I think is good, because I mean, okay, I call them 15-minute prisons, because that's what they are, in my opinion, or that's how they will get them with this technology, because these cameras and these bollards and these things, as you say, they're building the walls of the prison in front of us.
Absolutely.
And yet we never asked for it. Nobody, I've not heard anyone who said, yeah, I think I really need to live in a 15-minute neighborhood. No one's ever said that.
No, it's bizarre, and this is stuff that I've been aware of for well over a decade, and it's quite funny because with the YouTube channel, I mean, essentially, I'm a car guy. Come on, I started making videos because I wanted to buy old cars and just make funny videos about reviewing cars. That was all I wanted to do. I just wanted to be another Jeremy Clarkson and have a bit of fun and rock around with some old cars. Yeah, and that's just it. And then as you go further down the line, you start thinking, oh, thank you very much, I've just had a special delivery. As you go further down the line, you start getting to the stage of, hang on a minute, I just want to make car videos. these things are impacting car owners. I want to go on road trips. These things are impacting my ability to go on road trips. And then suddenly I've found myself starting to make these videos and people like them. So I've found growth in my YouTube channel when I started to talk about stuff that I never wanted to talk about on my channel. But where I'm at with the channel, and I often get in the comments people saying, oh, you know, Geoff, you need to go and look at such and such. I know, I've already looked at it, but I try not to dump everything onto the channel all at once. And I think,
you're right.
Because it's very overwhelming for people. I think it's one thing for me to say, hello, I'm with you. I don't want Sadiq Khan to charge you £12.50 a day. But it's a very different thing for me to say it starts with £12.50 a day. Then there's going to be a new pandemic. Then they're going to wipe out half the population. And by the end of it, we're all going to move from the countryside into these big tower blocks. And you're going to have no nutrition, no access to everything. Thanks for watching my videos. Please subscribe.
Exactly. You know, but you're dead right to do that because, I mean, as my producer, Jed, he and I have this constant discussion point because I will go very much hardcore on the particular issue. But he makes a very valid point. Yeah, but you can, that scares the normies. It does scare the normies. I suspect the normies don't watch me, so I don't care. But you're in a much more interesting position because, like, I noticed that one of the things that you seem to say quite a lot is, you know, you just want to be left alone to just and that's something that I reckon 99% of us are like that. You know, leave us alone, please. We just want to get on with our lives, want to drive a nice car, do what we want, go on road trips, and just get on with our life. That's all we want. But Geoff, the problem is that, you know, when you combine these things like the rollout of electric vehicles and these 15, 20-minute neighborhood things, that all does not point to them leaving you alone at all, does it?
No, it doesn't. And when I think it was one of my Royal Mail videos where I said at the end of the video, that was like my sign off, you know, I just want to be left alone. Yeah. And it really resonated with people because it's very genuine. And it's not just that I want to be left alone. I want my kids to be left alone as well. I want them to be left alone in terms of, I don't want people interfering with putting all this weird stuff into the education system. Yeah. And I want them to be left alone to be able to have a life like what I've had. And as we go further along the line, I think, hang on a minute, I've got these two little boys, they're 6 and 10. If I can see the world going a certain way in my lifetime, then what the heck does it look like for them? And it's extremely concerning. But that is just it. I don't really want to get involved with politics. I don't really want to be involved with, you know, becoming the face of the revolution. I don't really want to be involved with anything. I would like to just be left alone, but it seems like that's not happening. So I'm ending up getting involved in all this stuff.
Yeah, well, sometimes that's the way it operates. You know, you maybe don't want to be in it, but if the direction that we're being pushed is it's so palpably, you know, it's going to make life so much unrecognizable. Like, honestly, like when I remember back when I started driving and I look at what it's like now, there's been change, but it's all been incremental and it's not that much more different driving in the 2020s than driving like I did in the late 1970s. Yeah, it's more or less. But when I look at what driving is going to be like in the 2030s, Geoff, I just see it going off the cliff. I really do, because I don't see how. Because this doesn't work, someone said, Jed says, was it a Model T Ford? Jed, how dare you say that? You're dismissed with instant effect. No, it wasn't a Model T Ford, but the point is that driving hasn't, you know, I mean, I think cars are quite cool. And as I say, I do like modern cars, Geoff. I'm a sucker for a well-spec'd up modern car. But I think that's coming to an end unless enough people, manufacturers included, sort of waking up to the fact that the politicians, because this is politically driven, you know, we haven't mentioned the World Economic Forum, but we'll throw that one in. It's politically driven for no good effect from the majority of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I do find it interesting that you say motoring hasn't changed too much. I can appreciate the way you say that. But I mean, I started driving in probably the early 2000s, and the difference is phenomenal to how it is today. But, you know, the youngsters these days, they're not engaging with cars in the way they did in your time and in my time. They don't have that sense of freedom. They don't have that, you know, pass a driving test and then you've got the keys to go anywhere. We've lost that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Whether that's because of volume of traffic, quality of the roads, congestion in towns, cost, you know, it's so prohibitively expensive now for youngsters to get on the road. It's a totally different world. But yeah, as you say, these are all policies that are driven by somewhere else. And as you say, I think you used the word unrecognizable, and that's exactly what it is. But how do we get across to your average Joe that their life is going to be unrecognizable without them saying you're a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist? That's the difficult part.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. But I mean, if they make vehicles pretty much unaffordable for a big section of the population, surely that's a big sort of red flag, isn't it? I mean, you can't afford to buy a car.
Yeah.
And certainly if they get us to transit to EVs, then they've got us where they want us, I think, because without the combustion engine that's been such a blessing for for such a long time. I mean, but getting shot of that, Geoff, they do get shot of a particular lifestyle, which everyone watching this undoubtedly has enjoyed for whatever length of time. I've enjoyed it for probably more than most, but I just see that totally under threat, And like you, I mean, I've got grandkids, and I'm looking at my grandkids. My little grandson earlier on this evening, and he was in a little toy cars that they have, and he was driving this little toy car around the room. And I was just thinking, what's going to be happening to you in about 20 years' time? What will you be driving, or will you be driving? And I don't know.
Or will you even be around based on what may well be coming this summer? That's the question, and that's a terrifying question.
Yeah. It is incredible. I'm just reading some comments here. Brookie says, I prefer an old banger, David. Right, okay, I'll not read it right. So Biotech Babe says, I love the smell of petrol in the morning. Yeah, I mean, the thing, actually, Geoff, one thing you did say, you mentioned Teslas in terms of performance, acceleration. Just to revert to that for a second, I was standing in a main street not that long ago, and there was very few cars around. I saw a Tesla take off. I think it's a Tesla, the basic one, whichever one that is, and it just went like a rocket. I mean, I was impressed, to be honest, that level of acceleration is possible, and silent as well, no noise, just vroom. And that did impress me, just in terms of acceleration. Is that because the battery can provide that much power faster than the traditional combustion engine?
Yeah, it's the way the motors work. So you have instant power. And if anybody would like a laugh, if you go on YouTube and search Geoff Buys Cars Volvo C40, that was the first time I drove an electric car, which is the new high-performance Volvo EV. I'd gone over to the showroom to do a video on one of their classics, and then said, oh, while you're here, you ought to go drive that one. And honestly, the thing was so fast, it made me feel sick. But I came away from that test drive thinking, does anybody really need to drive that fast? Yes. I was able to drive that electric car at 80 to 110 miles an hour on roads where I wouldn't dream of driving those speeds in my own car. And I came away thinking, this won't be a good thing.
But then the weird thing is, as you say, you can get to high speed in roads that you wouldn't normally drive that fast on. But then the weirdest thing of all is talking about these EVs on motorways, where you do conventionally drive faster. Then the performance, they don't like them in the same way, do they? The EVs in terms of the motorways.
No, they don't. They don't like doing the long distance cruising as such. Yeah. It saps the battery.
Yeah, but that's so weird that, so we're designing a car that doesn't allow you to travel too far. Now then, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I mean, that's kind of convenient. You see, the only places I can see an EV would work would be if you lived literally in an inner city with lots of charging points and you never traveled. Someone said to me the other day, if you do more than 12,000 miles a year, Geoff, under no circumstances buy an electric vehicle. Would you agree with that?
I think I would, yeah, and I think I would. And what you've just said there about the inner city thing, you're looping back around to what I said earlier on how my EV scenario would work. It needs to be small, it needs to be lightweight, it needs to operate in the city, it needs to be easy to charge, and they need to be affordable, which is everything that the EV market is not. I was in an Audi dealership just the other week, and the salesman was saying, oh, we've just been over to Germany and they've shown us the new range of EVs. There's a new one coming out. It's got 400-mile range. It's an SUV and it starts at £80,000. Yeah. A, there's no way at that 400-mile range. B, £80,000. It's ludicrous. These are just toys for people that want to virtue signal.
Mm.
The way I like to drive, people always comment on my videos when I'm doing anything that is talking about driving EVs. They'll always say, all you need to do is plan your journey, make sure you know which petrol stations you're stopping at to charge your car, make sure you're organised, make sure you're fully charged. That's not the way I like to live my life. I almost missed this live stream because I've forgotten about it. I like to be able to wake up tomorrow, fill my car and say, right, kids, everybody in, we're driving to Edinburgh. You can't do that with an electric car. And I would really, really love an electric car company to contact me and say, right, Geoff, I'm going to prove you wrong. Here's an electric car that can do the type of journeys that you like to do. Why don't you test it for a weekend? Drive to Northumberland, go see your family, and you'll find it's the best thing ever. And oddly enough, my inbox isn't filling up with invites.
No, but you can see, I've watched so many videos of, and my producer loves to send me them, of people with trying to do range, and it just, I mean, there's so much stress involved. You know, they're continually, you talk about range anxiety. Look at, and of course, then the other thing is, whoa. Whenever people do plot out where they're going to stop off to charge, what happens, Geoff? What happens if the charge point doesn't work? What happens if there's a queue? Oh, I mean, all this stuff in real life, because this is how it works, isn't it? So again, I just think I don't know how people do it. I really don't.
Well, we saw this around Christmas time. I mean, a follower of mine sent me a video of Penrith service station in the Lake District. It must have been about December the 28th. And he just sent me this jokey video saying, yeah, check this out. And there's, 40, 50 Teslas in a queue. And it was the same at every station up and down the country. And there's a lot of people who drive EVs and these EV evangelists saying, oh, it's just part and parcel of owning an EV. You've just got to learn to deal with it. I'm sorry, I've got 2 young children. The last place I want to be is in a service driving a car where I can't turn the heaters on in the gap between Christmas and New Year. That's my idea of hell. The other thing that people underestimate when they talk about EVs and planning your journey and just make sure you stop at a service station for enough time, they underestimate just how naff British service stations are. Our road infrastructure is rubbish. Motorway service stations, most of them, apart from Gloucester and T-Bay, which I think is a nice one, are rubbish. I don't want to spend any time in them. I don't want to sit there for 45 minutes and wait for my crappy electric car to drive. I don't want to spend any time there. My life's too short for that.
Yeah, well, I agree. Yeah, again, it sucks the pleasure out of motor. That's just the point. So much of what they have planned seems to me to be about sucking all the pleasure out of the thing that you like to do, and many of us like to do, being able to have a nice drive. And also there is that kind of you want to be able to go where you want and maybe suddenly decide, no, I'm going to go here. You can't do that if you're constantly watching your range and seeing it trickle down. And I mean, because you live in England, I mean, you have much sort of longer distances than I would have over here in Northern Ireland. But even where I live, there's journeys I could undertake in my car that there's no way I could do those. It's just not possible. And if it's not possible in 2023, when will it be possible?
I think that's just it. I think there's going to need to be some sort of major development on electric cars or infrastructure. And I also think that a lot of people have bought these electric cars expecting that development to come along, expecting the infrastructure to catch up, expecting it to grow. And this hasn't happened. So more and more people have adopted electric cars, but the infrastructure hasn't grown at the same rate. So to drive your electric car on a daily basis, to do your long trips, you need 15 different apps on your phone. So you can pay for 15 different charging stations. They all charge different rates. Yeah. Most don't work when you arrive there. Again, if this was about saving the planet, we would have one generic electric provider at all the service stations, and they would be run by the government because it's about saving the planet. But instead, no, it's just about profit, isn't it? So it's about who can provide the electric and get the most money out of the people who are charging the cars. It's ludicrous.
And you see, if you're charging your car up fully on electric at this point in time, how would you say that compares to charging your car up with, say, diesel or petrol? Is it the same?
Great question. In the old days, when we weren't being completely ripped off for electric cars would come out on top every time. And when people went on my videos, if you're on a good rate for your electric, and if you can charge your electric car on the night time, they still come out pretty well when compared to a petrol or diesel. However, when you start charging your electric car at public charging stations, it then gets quite expensive. The other thing, and I've been sent 2 emails today from people saying that the prices have gone up. All 3 local chargers to my house have gone up significantly just this week. And I've just received another email from someone saying supermarkets have put their charging rates up. One of them was by something like 115%. So again, if you buy your petrol and diesel car, you are, the only thing you've got to watch out for is the price of the petrol and diesel at the pumps, and that is relative to how much a barrel of oil is. Yeah. But with the price of electric at the moment, it's going to depend on, well, how much the government decide they're charging for electric and how in bed they are with all the electric companies. And also, what kind of mood is the person in that runs the electric charging? All these people that went out and bought EVs because they were getting free charging at work, why would you presume that you can charge your car for free anywhere? That's ludicrous. So all these companies that have got charging points in now seems to me like they're putting the pricing up, which is something I predicted when electric cars first came around.
Yeah, well, funny enough, I know someone who is a teacher, and they've just got an electric car EV, because when they go to the school, they've now put in a few free charge points. But I'm thinking to myself, hang on a second, if schools are under all this financial pressure, blah, 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 that we keep hearing about, and what you can afford to provide free charge for your teachers' cars, that seems weird to me. I'm not sure if that one's going to sustain itself, but that's going to be a tiny, Jed's right, nothing's for free, everything's subsidized, so somebody's paying for that, but again, and the individual concern travels about 10 miles a day, I mean, I suppose it works for someone like that. It probably does. You're getting free power.
Yeah. If you travel 10 miles a day and you charge your car at work and you don't mind spending £30,000 on a small car, because nobody ever talks about the purchase cost either, because it's per month, or the company pays for it, or it's subsidized, or whatever. When the problem is, because of where my YouTube channel is at, when people come to me and they say, "Yeah, Geoff, what car do you think I should get? I've got X amount of budget, I do X amount of driving, I'm thinking of a hybrid, I'm thinking of this, I'm thinking of that," I always end up suggesting a £500 Volvo, because whatever the scenario, it just works out better.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, my son drives a Volvo, so he's a fan of Volvos. But I mean, Hector's house here says the grid nearly collapsed this winter. Imagine what would happen. Yeah, that's a good point with more EVs. But see, Geoff, this is what we've sort of gone over this point a couple of times. But Hector's is right here. It's inconceivable that the grid could ever have sufficient resource to allow all of us to drive around in these little EVs. It ain't going to be happening, Geoff, is it?
It's not. And I'm just seeing a comment there. I know I'm a little behind, but talking about public health safety on charging points and fires. The fact of the matter is, these EVs are catching fire at an alarming rate. And when they do, they cannot be put out. So there's a fantastic company, and I can highly recommend you go follow them on Facebook, because they have a sense of humor. They make these giant EV bathtubs that you tow behind a lorry. So when your EV has caught fire, even if you've put the fire out, it's highly likely that it's going to reignite itself. So what you have to do is you have to completely immerse the vehicle in one of these gigantic tanks, which takes thousands and thousands of litres of water. But thankfully, this company that make them on Facebook have got a very good sense of humour. So I can highly recommend following them. But again, we're meant to be saving the planet. We're meant to be moving forwards. Building cars out of a material that self-combusts and then cannot be put out unless you put it in thousands and thousands of gallons of fresh water. Like, where's the forward movement on that? There is nothing. There's no progression in that, is there? It's insane.
I'm seeing a lot of Volvo love here. I see Ibersteller says, I have a 27-year-old diesel Volvo, and it has never let me down. There you go, Iber. I think Geoff approves. Brookie over in Getter says, my husband's looking at a Volvo XC40. I see. Someone, Mum to number one says, half the car park at the Metro Centre in Newcastle has been taken over for charging. So, Yeah, honestly, I mean, it does fascinate me this, and we're going to bring things to an end in a minute, Geoff. But in the final analysis,
That's the
yeah, in the final analysis, this is the fire service buys huge. I mean, honestly, you have to laugh at this. You have to laugh.
You have to laugh.
Yeah, but it's mad. It is totally mad, and like we're saying this in April of 2023. I wonder what the situation will be like in April of 2033. That's what I'll be really interested to see. We certainly, we can't go down the route that they're trying to push us down, Geoff. I don't think, or certainly the majority of people will not be happy. Maybe they don't care about that. Maybe they don't mind.
I think in order for us all to still be here in April 2033, quite a lot of the conspiracy theories would have to have not come true.
Yeah, and that's a problem, because the one thing I discovered, Geoff, is every one of them's come through so far. Every one of these I mean, I don't look upon them as conspiracy theories. They're just, sort of early. We're just a bit too early to the story for most normies. So yeah, as you say, we'll have to wait to see where we are, if we are here in 2033. What I want to do, Geoff, is thank you very much for coming on, and I can see all the comments, loads of positive comments across the stream. Just everyone, just to give a shout out, please make sure you follow Geoff on YouTube's, but he's also on the Twitters, and Jed's just putting all the links across there. So do support Geoff. Make sure, as I say, I watch a lot of your stuff, Geoff. I think you got a really nice style of presenting. He's on Instagram, Facebook, all Geoff Buys Cars, and his website is geoffbuyscars.com. Right, folks, there we have. We've set the world to right when it comes to EVs. Sterling endorsement from Geoff and myself. Stay the hell away from them if you're sensible. But down to you. We believe in free choice, even if others don't. And we will be back just before we go. Just let you know, I'm back tomorrow night on the live stream on podcast. And on Friday night, Geoff, I am doing a Twitter Spaces with the cartoonist Bob Moran, if you know Bob Moran, who has caused quite a kerfuffle on Twitter with a particular cartoon he did there about a week or so. So anyway, Bob's coming on at 8 o'clock on Friday night. So if you can listen into Twitter, folks, you'll be able to have a hope. I have invited Julia Hartley Brewer, or I will be inviting Julia Hartley Brewer and Piers Morgan to join. I don't think they'll be coming, but Bob will be there, Charlotte will be there, I'll be there. So you got that on Friday night. Tomorrow night we'll have our usual banter. Geoff, again, big thank to you. Enjoy the rest of your drink. Enjoy the rest of your time. And a real pleasure to speak with you. Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.